Well, fantastic. Today we have another episode of That's Classic. And today we have a little bit different one. A lot of times I'm just talking to different celebrities from, the past and things like that. Well, today's kind of an interesting one. We have with us today a gentleman that was the former head of MGM Pictures. He was the former president of worldwide production for Columbia Pictures. And he's overseen or produced, I should say, over 500 films. I mean,
no, I haven't produced over five.
No, I said overseen or produced.
Or produced, right.
Yeah, you got to throw that in. It's got to be just that little bit. Anyway, of over 500 films. I mean, that is a crazy number. So anyway, I'd like to welcome Michael Nathanson. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, John. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's kind of exciting. So right out of the gates, I wanted to talk to you. I did a lot of different research angles on you. And one I found kind of interesting, you were in a raft on like the Colorado River or something like that with Pierce Brosnan, and this is right around the same time that he is replaced as James Bond. And so I'm intrigued not only what that was like, but also what went down there that that decision was made.
Okay, well, that's very good research that you found out that little piece. I did go down the Colorado River over a 5 or 6 day trip with Pierce Brosnan and 10 other guys. Peter Guber, the head of the broadcast committee for the NFL. There were a lot of people. John Feldheimer, who ran Lionsgate or still does, and Pierce. He was invited. I have to be honest with you. I don't believe at that time. Oh no, he did know. Yes, he did know. Technically, we had sold the company, and the private equity consortium that bought us wanted the current management. We had parachutes, and they didn't want us to leave. I didn't want to go, quite frankly. I really enjoyed what I was doing, and they were most interested in the library and not continuing to do production. And I desperately tried to explain to them that if you continue to do production, the library will advance. If you don't do production, the B and C titles of the library won't get sold.
Sure.
Because there's nothing, you can't attach something attractive to them. Now, I digressed from the Bond issue. Towards the end, before we sold the company, the Broccolis were sprung on us that it's time for a change. And
for my listeners, he's talking about the Broccoli family, which is the people behind the James Bond films.
Yeah, actually, the rights to the Bond movie are co-owned by MGM. 50% of them are owned by MGM and 50% by the Broccoli family. Neither one of us can do it without the other.
Got it.
So it creates a forward thinking, but it also creates a little tension in that, we wanted a Bond movie every 2 years. And if the Broccoli said, well, we want to do it every 3 years, we'd be stuck,
Right.
And those kind of things went on. However, Pierce had done 3 or 4 Bond movies.
Yep.
We were in discussions and negotiations to do the next one. So when the Broccolis told us this, it was kind of a shock. We thought we could get one more, and that Pierce was good looking enough and young enough to continue.
And he wanted to, right?
Very much so. Very much so. Barbara Broccoli met him for breakfast at the Bel Air Hotel and explained to him that they were going to make a change, and he was devastated.
Wow.
He was really devastated. And I felt badly because, in a sense, we had seemingly, although it wasn't on purpose, it seemed like we were misleading him when we were talking about doing the next one. So it was a difficult thing for Pierce. I think in the end, or today, if you were to ask Pierce, he's resolved with it. He's found a place and a niche where he still has the Bond aura, but he's also developed into a meaningful dramatic actor.
No, I would agree with you. At the time that you were on that raft with him and half of Hollywood's higher ups,
I'll be
what
honest with you, it never came up.
it never came up.
That specific issue never came up.
It wasn't. Okay, so he was in a different place. He didn't hold anything over you at that time.
No, he knew how and why it had happened. He didn't when he first heard it, but by that time, I mean, that was Memorial. I can tell you exactly. That was Memorial Day weekend, 2005. And this had happened in April.
I got you.
Or March of 2005.
So he was able to, by that time he had a little bit of distance to it and all of that.
At least externally, I internally, he may have been thinking otherwise, but that particular issue never came up.
I got you.
There were a lot of things to fear on that trip going down the Colorado River.
Yeah. What was that trip like? What the heck? What was that like? I mean,
it was a life-changing experience for me. I had done a lot of river rafting, but never down the Colorado River and never with that kind of fast water. And, there were 14 guys who have high testosterone who were in this thing.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the real people come out, certain people who are scared of fears because we had to hike over rocky cliffs. And one guy said, I can't do that. And another guy fell out of the boat and he cried. I mean, there was a little bit of deliverance.
I believe it. When you get, my guess is based on what you're saying, you're in like grade 4, grade 5 rapids at times.
Yes.
Yeah.
Particularly that early in the season where the water is very, the runoff is intense there in May.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's fun.
Better in August or September.
Oh, yeah. Before we go on with the interview, I just wanted to remind you to please subscribe to That's Classic if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell so that you'll know when my next episode is being released. Okay, let's go on with the interview. Oh, yeah. So, look, for my audience, as I said, Michael has like 3 decades of background in the business. He's, at a high level. But I also think what's interesting is your background. I looked... Your dad was a director on the original Tonight Show, which is wild. My first question there was, do you know if it was Steve Allen or Jack Parr?
It actually preceded both of them. It was called America Tonight. It's called America Tonight. And it was a remote show that traveled all around New York City. And they took the Tonight part and made it the Tonight Show. And then it was Steve Allen was the first guy. My dad worked on the bridge to the Tonight Show with Steve Allen. Yeah.
Wow.
Not Jack Parr.
That's unbelievable. And not only that, I saw he directed over the coverage of over 13 Super Bowls. I was like, come on.
Still holds the record for the most Super Bowls directed by one man. Yeah.
Wow.
And I don't think it'll be broken because there's so many, in those days, there were 3 networks and only 2 covered football. And or for most of the time, ABC eventually got football. But, and there were only 2 or 3 sports directors. So, he was fortunate enough to be the Lou Gehrig of directors.
Yeah. I mean, you come from quite a family, though. Michael, I'm sorry, your mother was also a producer. I saw that she worked on the Perry Como show. I mean, come on. And, I'm going to throw this out. Your grandfather founded one of the first radio stations in Philly. Your great-great-grandfather founded Gimbel's department store. I mean, which anybody that's ever watched like Miracle on 34th Street, that whole movie is about Macy's and Gimbel's coming together. I mean, that is quite a background you have in your family. No wonder you went into the business.
Yeah. Yeah. I to be honest with you, show business and each one of my parents or grandparents were in a very different area of show business that I chose to go into. But I had the bug as a little kid. It was what I knew and what I understood. And I was fortunate enough, my dad had this wonderful job covering sports. And as a young boy, what could be better? And since my dad traveled a lot, particularly in my formative years, he was gone 46 weeks of the year.
Wow.
Weekends primarily. But early on, there was a sports anthology show called NBC Sports in Action, which was their version of Wide World of Sports.
Yeah.
And he would travel off to Zandvoort, Holland, or he would go to Lake Placid to cover barrel jumping for a week. So my dad was gone a lot, but he made up for it as soon as I was old enough. And that was, 10, 11, 12. He took me with him.
Oh, wow.
And I got to, the first trip I ever took was to Laramie, Wyoming for a Diamond Jubilee rodeo.
Wow.
And I can't believe I even remember this. The announcer was a man named Lou Boda, for those sports freaks out there that may know that name. Anyway, that was my first trip. It was my first time on an airplane. It was a memorable experience. But as time went on, I would travel with him, football games and baseball games. He'd leave on Friday. School was out. I'd go leave Friday afternoon or take Friday off and go with him, to exciting places like Cleveland and Chicago and Minneapolis and places like mostly AFL and AFC teams.
Did you go to any of the Super Bowls?
Oh yeah. I went to several Super Bowls. I started working. As soon as I was old enough, I started as a gopher. I got hot dogs and beer for guys in the booth. I made sure, and as time went on, I sort of became an associate producer at the age of 16 or 17. I was sent into the NBC did the game of the week in those days, which was very popular. And there were two games. There was the network game that would go to the whole country. And there was a backup game that always was done in New York because it was least expensive to travel the crew. If it rained on the network game, the backup game became the network game. So they always had a backup game in case the other game was canceled.
I never knew that.
I was the permanent, production assistant, associate producer, whatever. And starting in April, I would, on Saturday mornings, 5:30 a.m., I'd take the Flushing line out to Shea Stadium at the time, or if it would always be either a Met game or a Yankee game, depending on which one of them were home.
Wow.
So I'd either be going to Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, or I'd be going out to Shea Stadium in Flushing early in the morning. I'd get cases of soda and beer and put it on a flat truck and move it to the side where the mobile units were. I'd go up into the booth, get all that set up. I'd jam quite often at Shea Stadium. The announcers would come in that morning. I would go to the airport because I could drive by the time I was 16. I'd go to the airport and I was fortunate enough to pick up Maury Wills.
Wow.
Tony Kubek, Sandy Koufax.
Oh.
I remember one time Shea Stadium had ramps going up. It didn't have stairs or escalators.
Yeah.
So I'm in with Maury Wills, and he was a really cool guy. He was dressed in a suit and tie, and I'd always get him 2 packs of Marlboros. I couldn't believe the guy smoked. And we at the bottom of the ramp at Shea Stadium, and he said, "I'll bet you $100 I can beat you to the top." And I was 16, right? And Maury Wills was 40 something.
Wow.
I thought I could beat him. He left me in the dust, man. He went he was gone. I'll never forget. I just stood there and went, wow. But my most exciting thing was at the bottom of the 8th inning, they'd send me down to the dugout, and I'd watch the 9th inning in the dugout.
Wow.
As soon as the game was called, I'd have a headset, and the producer would say, "Get me, Reggie Jackson for the interview." Wow. And I'd run out on the field and go up to Reggie Jackson and say, "NBC, Tony Kubek wants to do an interview with you. Will you do it, Mr. Jackson?" And 9 out of 10 times they said yes. Sometimes they ran right by you.
Wow. I
would get, Reggie Jackson over, and Tony Kubek would be either in the booth or he'd come down to the field and they'd do a post-game interview. And as time went on, I tell me if you want me to continue telling these stories.
I love it. Are you kidding me? That's what my show is about. Go ahead.
As time went on, my dad, who was the director, and he was considered a very innovative director at the time, and captured emotion. He told stories, and football became the medium for television and telling stories. You could tell he was famous for getting the coach on the sideline, the field goal kicker warming up, the injured player on the other side who can't come out when the announcer's talking about it. My dad would get it on there. A lot of the other football coverage wasn't doing that then. They do it now. And my dad sort of created that.
Isn't your dad also one of the first that used like the handheld cameras, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Well, there was actually a guy at CBS named Tony Verna who who first did it. My dad was the first person at NBC who did it, but
Mhm.
they argue about it a lot. But my dad had something that no other director did at the time, and I'm not sure if they do it now. My dad had a spotter. Now, the announcers have spotters. So when somebody makes a tackle and the announcer can't quite know who it is, he'll point, there's a sheet of paper in front of the announcer, and the spotter will point to the number that was made the tackle. And that's quite often how the announcer says, number 53, Jones made the tackle.
Huh.
He's doing a dozen other things he can't necessarily see. So the spotter does that. So my dad had this idea. I can only see what my cameras show me. I'm limited to what's going out on the field. I need my own set of eyes, not my cameraman's eyes. So he said, do you think you could do it? And I said, yeah. And I was 17, maybe. And I'd go up in the booth. I had a monitor. I had a headset that went to him, and he speaks to the whole crew, cameramen, videotape operators, everybody on his headset. And then on the other side of my ear, I had the announcers. And my job was to lay out the field. My dad said, where's the Rams coach? Far side coach, left 30-yard line. Quickly tell his cameraman, far side coach, left 30-yard line.
Oh my gosh.
They break from the huddle. Which receivers are going far? Which receivers are near? Who's in the slot? I'd have to say 26 in the far side slot. Isolate 26 in the far side slot.
Wow.
So we developed a thing. And then sometimes the announcers would be talking about something, and my dad is doing 400 different things at once. He's not hearing the announcers. I would say, announcers are talking about near side coach. Number 3, get me near side coach. And he'd put it up on the air, and he'd say, thank you, Mike. You know, it'd be, but now he developed this. Now I couldn't always do it. I couldn't always do it. He had 2 or 3 other guys. All of those other guys turned out to be famous sports directors. Craig Janoff, there's 2 or 3 other guys. I can't remember their names, but he trained these guys to be, Craig Janoff did Monday Night Football for 10 years, but he was my dad's spotter before he did that.
That's cool. Amazing. Hey, just so you know, I don't like, but your microphone sometimes goes a little bit quiet.
Yeah, it's because I moved too far away from it, I think. Is that better?
Okay. That works. I don't want you to feel stiff the whole time you're talking, though.
No,
but anyway,
sorry.
It does move. That is really fascinating, really fascinating. So, another angle, just going back, I guess, to your career. I had to mention your dad, though, and your mom and everybody. I mean, that's just incredible. You were very early on, you were production assistant, I saw, on The Deep, and I think it was one of the Sinbad movies. And
Sinbad in the Eye of the Tiger.
Yeah. Well, you know what? First, let's look at that one.
You heard of the Sinbad movies?
Oh, come on. Yes, I have. Of course.
There's a lot of people today that.
Anyway. Yeah. No, I'm in there and I saw it. And I know that Jane Seymour was in that one that we're talking about. What was she like at that time? I mean, literally, is that like her first movie? I don't even know it.
No, it wasn't her first movie. The fact is, she had completed the Bond film prior to this. It had not been released.
Oh, you're kidding! Where she plays the tarot card reader.
Exactly. She was a Bond girl, and that movie hadn't been released. One of the funny things about that movie, the movie starred Patrick Wayne, John Wayne's son. He played Sinbad.
Yeah.
Tyrone Power's daughter, Taryn Power, played the love interest.
Wow.
And Jane Seymour played the other love interest. And Ray Harryhausen, I'm not sure if you know who he is. Those of you who have studied animation, Ray Harryhausen was the principal artist in King Kong and developed the claymation for the stop action of King Kong.
Oh my gosh.
Later went on to create something called Dynamation. And all of the Sinbad movies, I don't know if you remember the dancing sword fights and the
I could
monsters.
Totally picture. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It was all done by Ray Harryhausen, and he and a guy named Charlie Schneer were the producers of the Sinbad movie.
Yeah,
and he was just an extraordinary guy. He would always say, "We're struggling through the quicksands of life, young man." I would go out with him on a desert plain, and he'd say, "Count off 60 steps," and I count off 60 steps. He said, "Stay there." Then he had some contraption that he was measuring, and then he would shoot a match shot that would then work later on for the three-headed monster or whatever he was doing. So
that is amazing, because I totally remember those monsters and stuff from Sinbad. I mean, they are the movie. I mean, really.
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah.
They were sort of B pictures for Columbia. They were a franchise for Columbia Pictures.
Yeah.
In the late 60s and 70s, and they made a lot of money. They didn't cost a lot in those days, but it was an amazing experience for me because it was the first feature film that I ever worked on, and we shot it in London. We shot on sound stages, matte shots and things like that in London, and then we went to Spain.
Wow.
We went to Almeria, Spain. Lawrence of Arabia, most of Lawrence of Arabia was shot, by the way. And there were crew on the crew that I was working with. They had worked on Lawrence of Arabia. That's how I know it was shot there. And I said, really, what did you do? He said, oh, I just raked the footprints. You know, this guy, his own job was to rake the footprints. But we shot in Spain, Almeria, Spain, Madrid. And then we spent 6 weeks on the island of Malta, in an old British Air Force base where we converted into sound stages. But it was an amazing experience. And it was the summer of my freshman year in college. And I was hooked at that point.
Was Jane Seymour, I mean, was it just like she was just a beautiful woman, or was, I mean, like I said, I thought she did a great job in that James Bond movie, by the way. I totally know it. I could picture it right now. And I think it was was it Yaphet Kotto?
Yes.
That was a great one. But did Jane at that time, was it did you even take into account she's got something or anything like that? Or
well, I mean, she was beautiful and we were all in awe of that. And she was very nice. She couldn't have been nicer. And we knew the Bond film, but I didn't know what the Bond film was,
Mm-hmm.
But the actor, my job, quite honestly, was quite often I had to go knock on the trailer and say, we're ready for you, Miss Seymour. And, she'd come out of the trailer. I would, it was an all British English crew. I was the only American on the crew. They all spoke something called rhyme and slang Cockney. So my nickname was Sherman Tank Yank, and they would say to me, get the dog an. I'd say, what? Get the dog an. What's the dog an? Dog and bone, phone. You have a sore nanny goat, throat, plates of meat, feet, German bands, hands, Gregory Peck, neck. There was all this code of slang Cockney. By the time I was done with the movie, I was one of them. They accepted me and I learned how to communicate with them. But it was quite a learning experience.
Oh, is that funny? If you want to get in on the fun of That's Classic, go to my merchandise store. You can get a t-shirt, a mug, or a variety of items. The QR code is right here on the screen. That'll take you right to the site, or I'll put it in the description below the video. Have fun, enjoy. Let's go back to the interview. Now then, the other one that you're a production assistant on was The Deep. We mentioned that. Now, and that's Jacqueline Bisset, right? Is that the one I'm thinking?
Exactly.
Yeah. Nice. You go from...
You like to say Bisset like kiss it.
Bisset like kiss it?
Yeah, Jacqueline Bisset.
Jacqueline Bisset. What was that experience like? I mean, two very these are not just casual movies. They involve a lot of the water with The Deep, the sand with the Sinbad. What was that like?
By the way, there was a lot of water with Sinbad too. One of the reasons we went to Malta was it was the world's largest tank at the time. So we would double Sinbad's boat in the tank and the horizon would look like it was a horizon, but it wasn't.
Interesting.
But The Deep was a huge movie compared to Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. I mean, Deep was at the time, a $10 or $12 million budgeted film, which is the equivalent today of $100 million budgeted film.
Yeah.
And that picture shot 6 weeks in the British Virgin Islands on an island called Peter Island, where we all stayed. The director's name was Peter Yates. The producer's name was Peter Goober. There was another producer named Peter Lake. It was just a coincidence. We stayed in this resort on Peter Island.
Oh, how weird. And years later, you're on a raft with Peter Goober.
Well, years later, I was on a raft with Peter Goober, and years later, he was the president. He was the chairman and CEO of Sony Pictures Entertainment. And while I was president of production, I worked for him again then. I
mean, just crazy anyway.
It was quite an experience. But the deep was 6 months of shooting or principal photography. We shot the last 6 weeks were shot in the Great Barrier Reef, where we shot shark footage. We built a tank in Bermuda, where we did a lot of the moray eel and all that stuff was done in the tank. And then we would shoot out in the live water, which was trying. And you had a cat, you had Robert Shaw, who had a significant drinking problem. So that was always something to deal with. Nick Nolte was coming off Rich Man, Poor Man.
Wow.
Big television hit.
Huge.
And Nick was a little bit of a wild guy, so
Nick is still considered a wild guy.
Yeah, I mean, often I was sent to go get Nick out of the trailer. And I'd go, he's not in the trailer. And I'd be looking all over for him. And I'd get a note, you can find me in town at this address,
Oh, wow.
Sitting at a bar or at a coffee shop or something, and I go, Nick, they're waiting for you on the set. Oh, okay. But
wow.
The real challenge for that movie, what was the production? I mean, up until that time, no movie had done that kind of underwater stuff before. And Jacqueline Bisset had never dived before. In fact, she learned how to dive the first week she got there. So
wow.
it was Lou Gossett was part of the cast, who recently passed, was also a great guy.
Oh God, he was great. I was going to ask you about what part of the Great Barrier Reef were you in? I spent a lot of time in Australia, and I've been up in Cairns and that whole area up there. I'm actually a diver, so I've actually done a bit of diving up there.
Oh, really? To be honest with you, I did not make the trip to that part. I didn't go.
Gotcha.
Described the locations where we shot. That was the only place I didn't go. Believe it or not, I had to go back. No one from my family had ever graduated from college.
Wow.
So my father, at that point in my career, the little part of my career that had started, I was hooked. I wanted to move to Los Angeles. I wanted to get a job. I wanted to do all that. And my dad said, no, you're going to graduate college.
Yeah.
And it was really hard for me. But I went to Ithaca College, to the film school there. And, life throws different things at us.
Yes.
Things that are challenging and things that are helpful. And when I was a horrible student, I'm dyslexic. I got thrown out of a couple schools because I couldn't keep up. I was put back in a lower grade. I had real challenging times.
Did you know,
academically?
I mean this the best way. Did you know that you were dyslexic? Because
no, the first up until 5th or 6th grade. That's why they kept saying I wasn't. They thought I was dumb. So they kept wanting to leave me back, and my parents would take me out of that school because they knew I wasn't dumb, but they didn't know what the problem was.
Yep.
And I ended up going to a place called the NYU Reading Institute for 18 months, which was a difficult school to go to. It was very different than what I had experienced. Anyway, I ended up going to another school where they did diagnose it, and they did, I never got past fractions. I never took algebra. I couldn't do that. So, but the school helped me, and I made my way through, and I had to do my SATs. And I think you get a guarantee if you put your name correctly, you get 450 automatically, or 450 points.
Wow.
So my combined score, I got 475 on the math and 475 on the English. So I had like an 825 combined score, or 850. And,
unbelievable.
Getting into college is not easy with that kind of thing.
Right.
But I had a tip that Ithaca College had a very good school of communications. And I went with my best friend. We first looked at Syracuse, and then I was looking at the map driving down from Syracuse, New York. And I said, hey, Bill, let's go to this place, Ithaca College. I hear they have a good school of communications. My friend had no interest whatsoever. I said, come, just drive me there. We're on our way. So he drives me. We go to the administration building, and I go in. And I said, "Can I get an interview in the School of Communications?" She said, "Well, you need an appointment in advance." I said, "I know. I'm just here. Could you try? Because maybe somebody's available." So she picked up the phone and she called a man named Skip Landon, who was the chairman of the cinema. They called it Cinema Studies, and he happened to be free. And I went to go meet with him.
Yeah,
and Skip was a really interesting guy. he believed in the practical sense of school, not the theory sense.
Yeah.
They did documentaries, they did commercials, they did industrial videos. He put the students to work professionally.
Right.
And he really believed that if he had students that succeeded in their careers once they graduated, it would boost the school.
Mm-hmm.
So he saw that at this time, I had worked all this television sports work. I had worked at a talent agency. And he was very impressed with my working thing. And lo and behold, he had worked in Oklahoma with Kurt Gowdy 25, 30 years before.
Oh my gosh.
Kurt Gowdy was NBC Sports premier announcer at the time. So we had this connection, and he looked at me and he said, if you agree you'll come here and apply early decision, I'll guarantee you get in.
Wow.
Stuck out my hand because I wasn't going to get into any other college. And I said, I agree. And my friend, who was pissed off at me because he's been sitting in the car for 2.5 hours, he goes, where the hell have you been? What are you doing? I said, I'm going to Ithaca College. I got in.
Wow.
But that's not it. The fact of the matter is Skip became a mentor of mine. And when I was fortunate enough to get this job on Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, which was a fluke in itself, I went to him and I said, it shoots during the school year. And he goes, you're going to be our pilot intern program. You're going to get 9 credits for working on the film.
Oh my gosh.
You got to get, I think, 6 more somehow else. And I went off as my freshman year to go work on Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. And the same thing happened with the Deep. The Deep, I was gone longer. And that's when my dad said, I was ready to leave. And he said, no, you got to graduate, which meant I had to I had to go to summer school to make up to graduate in time. And I graduated in May of 1978. And on July 5th of 1978, I got in my car and I drove cross country to start my career out here.
Ah, that's cool. That's a really cool story. I was going to say, when you brought up the dyslexia, I've had Henry Winkler on, and he also has had an interesting route that, went to Emerson and then, Yale and all of that. But same thing. He had these like moments that made it for him. So I just think it's cool. I think it's inspirational for people that are out there.
The truth is, if it were not for my dyslexia, I don't think any of this would have happened. The dyslexia caused me to work harder, caused me to find solutions to things that I wouldn't normally try to find solutions for. And I wouldn't have gone to Ithaca College. And if I hadn't gone to Ithaca College, I wouldn't have gotten the credit to get the job. So, you got it. Strange way life works in funny ways.
Yeah, it is.
But it was, I had trauma as a kid. I mean, I paid a price for that as well.
Oh, I understand. I mean, even he talks about his own parents, basically, in essence, in German, calling him dumb. They had a word for it. I can't remember what it was, but it is traumatizing. What is
Dummkopf. Dummkopf.
Yeah, I believe that's what they called him. Yeah. And so yeah, it just shows you that you can go beyond, but it doesn't take away the trauma. But it is you turned it around. That's cool.
But the thing that for your audience, the thing that I want to impress for those that may have learning disorders. I became the CEO of a Fortune 500 public corporation. Right. I couldn't do fractions and percentage divisions and things. But, I was able to run a company, and I was able to understand, and I was able to go to people when I couldn't understand something, and they would show me how it was done. So there's always a solution, and we shouldn't let the learning disabilities think that we can't achieve what we want.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I saw
fear is a reaction. Courage is a decision.
Right. That's great. Yeah. I think, I mean, when you say, hey, I oversaw numbers or whatever, I'm sorry, but I saw some figure that I think in one of the years you oversaw like $750 million worth of production. So I think you handled your fractions.
It was actually more. It was over $1 billion between production and marketing.
Yeah. Come on. So that's very inspirational. I think that's terrific. Okay, let's go back to a story. We'll pick one out here from you become you're overseeing films at Columbia Pictures, a lot of big ones. I'm curious if you interacted with any of the actors on any of these particular ones. So I'll mention my first one because I'm a huge fan of The Gentleman. Awakenings. Well, actually, The Gentleman. I'm a fan of De Niro, Robin Williams, and Penny Marshall. What did you get a chance to interact with them?
I did. I wouldn't say that I spent every day with them.
No, I understand
frequently,
that.
but I, Robin Williams was and still is, sui generis, unique unto all others, one of a kind. And, this was at that time, this was a very dramatic part for him that only Penny really understood. When she said to me, I want Robert De Niro and Robin. And I said, well, this is like a very serious movie.
Yeah.
She said, he's a great actor. Comedians are great actors. And I subsequently have learned that to be true. But
yeah.
So that was the first thing that I was a little concerned about. But I had full and Penny was also unique unto all others. She was sometimes the master of the half step. What do you want to do? I'm thinking, let me think. So there's a lot of that, but however she arrived at whatever she was thinking about, it was genius in how she did.
Yeah.
So I don't mean it as criticism. I just mean I had to learn how to adapt to work with her,
Yeah, she had that unique voice too,
Michael, I think we need to have a rap party. Penny, we just started the movie. I know, but I'm always worried you guys always trying to end without a rap party. And De Niro is just a man of few words. So, and he's terribly shy. And I worked with him then and subsequently and been with him socially, but he's just a very shy guy. And he was in the character. So, he was stiff, to say the least.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard he stays there while he's filming. Yeah.
Yeah. And we shot it I'm not sure whether it was Staten Island or Brooklyn in a mental institution.
Oh, I didn't realize you were actually in
that was closed. Yeah. A wing that was closed in a ment. So it was oppressive.
Wow. That is intense.
Yeah.
Wow. That must have been a heavy set.
I'll tell you a funny story though.
I'd love it.
That I have never told publicly, but I don't know. We were halfway through the movie, and the movie's shooting in New York. I'm in Los Angeles, and we're behind schedule, and we're over budget. I don't remember how much, but it was starting to become significant.
Yeah.
And I had to do something about it. And the man who was head of physical production was a guy named Gary Martin, who I loved. He was a great guy. He just recently, in the last 6 months, passed away. And he was a big guy. He was like 250 pounds. He was a construction manager when he started his career. And he and I had been working together already 6, 7, 8 years. So we knew each other really well. And we said, we got to go to New York. The picture's going to get out of control. So we go to New York, and the production, we had this meeting with Walter Parks and I think Larry Lasker were the producers of the movie, technically were the producers of the movie, and may have co-written the screenplay. They wrote WarGames, another movie that I wrote.
WarGames, definitely.
That's a whole other story. That's a better story than this. But so we flew to New York, and we had this meeting at 6:00 in the production office. And the truth is, these poor guys had no control over Penny. Penny was doing what she did, and they weren't about to tell her to stop.
Oh.
So I'm sitting there getting angrier and angrier because I'm seeing that they say, oh yeah, we are over budget. Oh yeah. Well, we've talked to Penny about it. And then I said, well, what have you done? Well, we're working on it. And I was getting angrier and angrier. And I didn't know what to do. I wanted to walk out to make a statement, which I did. I got up and I walked out and I walked right into the bathroom. It wasn't the door out. I walked through the wrong door. Now I'm in the bathroom and these guys think they think that I was walking out. They know I'm in the bathroom. And I basically said, you're out of control. And then it's about 5 minutes. I wouldn't walk out. I wasn't going to walk out of the bathroom. I was going to wait till they leave. I didn't care. And about 5 minutes later, Gary Martin knocked on the door. He said, Michael, I need to use the bathroom. I came out and I had my head down and everyone was laughing at me. And I certainly didn't solve the problem. But anyway.
Oh, freaking funny. So, okay, look, WarGames, I'm sorry you mentioned it. How do you not talk a little bit about WarGames? I mean, that's a unique movie in itself.
So WarGames, I was a junior, WarGames was 1981 or 82, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I was really in the formative years of my career, but I had a pretty good production background, all my television sports, location, a lot of that stuff is similar.
Yeah.
So I had experience with it. And I worked on those 2 movies on production. And by this time I had supervised 3 or 4 other movies. And I was a vice president of production at United Artists. A woman named Paula Weinstein was president of production, and I worked for her. Her sister was a woman named Lisa Weinstein, who was a producer of WarGames. And she lived with the director, a man named Marty Brest.
Oh, yeah. Very famous.
And there was another gentleman, Leonard Goldberg, who was a, legend television producer. And
literally
done a couple movies as well. And I knew Leonard for some reason very well as years before that. And Paula realizes that the person who's supervising the movie, who is not really equipped to do it, and she turned to me and said, "You've got to do this." Now, I was 25 years old. WarGames was this huge movie. I had been working, the chairman of the company, David Beagleman, had been fired. Wow. The last movie he greenlit was WarGames.
Oh.
And the movie was supposed to start in Seattle, shoot 5 or 6 weeks in Seattle, Washington.
And it starred
Matthew Broderick.
Exactly.
And Ali Sheedy.
Ali Sheedy. Exactly.
And 4 days away from principal photography to start. We're about to leave to go to Seattle. There's one problem. Marty hasn't figured out who to cast. He won't make a decision on the both.
You're kidding me. They didn't know the cast at that point?
Well, there were choices, but Marty, when I said master of the half step with Penny, Marty Brest makes Penny Marshall look decisive.
Wow.
So he couldn't decide. And up until 2 days, and I finally said to Leonard, I said, either he makes a decision or we're going to make it, because this is a disaster company. So he agrees on what's his name?
Matthew Broderick.
Matthew.
Yeah.
And then we still had another 2 days before we go. And still the day before he agreed to Ali Sheedy.
Oh my gosh.
We get up to Seattle. Bill Fraker, Academy Award winning cinematographer, is a guy named Harold Schneider was the line producer, notorious for his temper. And there's me. and I realize I'm becoming the de facto producer of this thing. Like everybody has a kind of specific producing role, but nobody's really managing them either.
Right.
And even though that I know this, I'm not sure that I'm equipped to do it.
And you're 25.
The first day of principal photography, Marty Brest yells action, and the actors are doing something in front of the camera, and he runs out in front of the camera, doesn't say cut. He runs out in front of the camera and gives them new screen direction.
Oh, wow.
Runs back behind the camera, and they do it. Now, this would go on for 2 days. These dailies were going back to the studio, seeing Marty Brest.
Oh, geez.
By day 5, we were 3 days behind.
Wow.
And I knew, and even though I had very little experience really, but I knew that Marty Brest was going to vapor lock and making this. This was trouble ahead.
Oh, yeah.
So the studio was a political hotbed. As I said, David Beagleman had been fired.
Yeah.
Paula Weinstein, who reported to David Beagleman, now was told to report to a man named Frank Rothman, who had been David Beagleman's lawyer a few years before that, but was now chairman of the combined MGM UA entertainment company.
Didn't David Beagleman get let go too because of some, like, it was a big deal?
It was years before that. There was a check forging scandal that he was in the middle of.
Oh, that's what it was.
There was a famous book written called Indecent Exposure.
Yes.
And he was caught up in that. When the book got published, it brought back all the other stuff. And that was one of the reasons he was let go.
Wow.
But Paula, who I reported to, now there was another gentleman named Freddie Fields, who coincidentally was David Beagleman's partner many years before that.
Very famous.
He was president of production of MGM and was vying to take over production for both studios. And he saw me, and I knew Freddie. I'd worked for Freddie for a couple of years before that. He saw me as I could act as a double agent. So he would call me in Seattle and say, how many shots they get in today? How many do this? Don't tell Paul I'm talking to you. We have to fire Marty Brest. And now I'm like, I developed an ulcer.
Wow.
So I didn't know who I was reporting to. I didn't know what I was supposed to say. And the movie was slowly going out of control. And there was this big meeting, and it was decided that we're going to have to shut the picture down when it moves back to Culver City, and we're going to have to fire the director. The movie finished ultimately in Seattle, and we moved back. We had this meeting in a big conference room, and there were all these executives, and I'm sitting at this table, and the decision is finally made. We're going to fire him, and we're going to hire a man named John Badham. And I said, when I asked him my opinion, I said, I think that's the right thing to do. And then they said, okay, who's going to, Michael, you're going to go down to the set and fire him. Me? So we waited till Friday, like 5:00. I went down to the set, and Marty basically wasn't even talking to me at this point. I was the enemy. And I said, Marty, I need a few words with you. He said, I can't talk to you. I said, no, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. And I suggest we go in your trailer. No, we can talk right here. And I said, okay, the studio's decided to let you go. We're shutting down the picture, and we're bringing in a new director. And he just looked at me and walked away. To this day, if I saw Marty Brest on the same sidewalk, he would walk on the other side of the side. He wouldn't talk to me.
Wow.
And we shut the picture down for 10 days. John Badham saw every frame of footage that was shot in Seattle, figured out what he could salvage from that and not have to reshoot, and directed a brilliant movie. It was a huge success.
Oh my God.
And to this day, not dated. It's in many ways more relevant today than it was then.
No, it's a really good movie, and the actors did a great job. My gosh, I love that movie. I think I just saw it like a year ago again. It totally holds up. It's amazing he got the performances out of them after all that. Jeez, that's incredible.
Well, John was a performance director. I mean, he started his career as a casting director.
Oh, wow.
And so performance was very good. But he's a very practical director. I mean, he worked everything out. It was such a pleasure to work with him.
You brought the right guy in. My gosh. Okay. I know you got to go. We have Michael has another thing to get to it.
I'm sorry. I would love to go more. And if you want, I'm happy to come back.
Michael, you have so many stories and things. I think we will. I think we'll do it. I think we'll have you come back, because there's just so much, just so that everybody out there knows. He's been involved in Heat with De Niro, Time to Kill with Matthew McConaughey, Wind Talkers with Nicolas Cage, Bandits with Bruce Willis, Hearts War with Bruce Willis. I mean, goes on and on.
Don't forget L.A. Confidential.
And L.A. Confidential. There you go. So Academy Award winner, nominee. Yeah. Let's plan on it. But I appreciate you being here. It's been a lot of fun, and we'll set up another time for sure.
Thanks, John. I really appreciate it, and I really enjoyed it.
Oh my God, I had a blast. Thank you so much. It was just fun. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
All right. See ya. Hope you enjoyed the interview. Please don't forget to hit the subscription button and also hit the notification bell right after that so that you get notified whenever I have a new episode. And be sure to check out some of my other interviews. Henry Winkler, Jerry Mathers, Angela Cartwright, Shelley Fabre. It goes on and on. They're so great. Enjoy.